Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Coding 101 is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This episode of Coding 101 is brought to you by DigitalOcean. Simple and fast cloud hosting built for developers. Deploy an SSD cloud server in 55 seconds. Try it today for free. Visit DigitalOcean.com, and once you sign up, be sure to enter the promo code C101 in the billing section for a $10 credit. And by Lynda.com, the online learning platform with over 3,000 on-demand video courses to help you strengthen your business, technology, and creative skills. For a free 10-day trial, visit lynda.com/C101. That's LYNDA.com/C101. Today on a Wildcard episode of Coding 101, we're speaking with Jeff Prosise. Be ready to learn the secrets of the coding masters. Hello and welcome to Coding 101. It's the show dedicated to those people who want to learn the secrets of the Code Warriors and the Code Monkeys. I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit. And joining me, as always, is RoboCop, Mr. Lou Maresca. Lou, that doesn't sound right.
Hey, Padre. Yeah. Robocoder? I don't know. That's not good either.
That's better. Robocoder Lou Maresca. That actually works. Thanks for joining us again, Lou. I know it's what, 40 degrees in Seattle right now?
Oh, it's beautiful here today. It's just a little rainy, though. You know, it's always the same way it is.
Yeah, well, let's not talk about the rain because we've got something more important. We are having another Wildcard episode. And again, we're going to say this every time we have one of these. For those people who may not have been paying attention, this is a chance to sort of cleanse the palette after a programming module. As we move from Ruby to C# to PHP to Perl, we want to show you the people who are behind the code, the people who actually make their living in the world of programming. And today we've got a doozy. We have Mr. Jeff Prosise. He is with Wintellect, who is going to tell us a little bit about all the things he taught to Lou Maresca. Jeff, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Jeff, what's your relationship with Lou? How did you two know each other?
So we know each other through Microsoft. Lou works at Microsoft and has worked there for quite a while. I work at Microsoft, not as an employee, as a contractor, and he and I were in some classes together. I think he came in and attended one of the classes I was teaching there. I guess he drew the short stick, and then actually came back for a second class, which I never quite figured out, because you'd think that after sitting through my class one time, he wouldn't want to do it again.
Well, Lou just does keep coming back to the Twit TV network, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I thought we would have scared him away, but here he is. Jeff, what first brought you into the world of computer science? We asked this of all of our Wildcard guests because it's always interesting to see what it was that made you realize this was something that you wanted to do.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it was computer graphics that really got me interested in it. So I think Lou probably knows that, like a lot of folks at Microsoft and outside of Microsoft, I don't have a degree in computer science. I'm an engineer by trade. I love things that fly, and still to this day, love to build things that fly. So it was the early 80s. I was just out of college with an engineering degree. I had a job with a big firm that does aerospace stuff. And personal computers were just starting to kind of take off. I wasn't even aware of them in college. Computers were the furthest thing from my mind. But I saw an ad in an engineering magazine for this little piece of hardware, a little computer that just looked gorgeous. And I thought, you know what? That might be really, really interesting. So I tried to buy one, never quite got one, but in part because I was just out of school, just gotten married. My wife was still in school. We didn't have two nickels to rub together. But at about that time, Commodore dropped the price of their Commodore 64s from $600 to $200.
Wow.
And I remember going to a local retailer that evening they had this big stack, a pyramid of blue Commodore 64 boxes near the front of the store. And as I was walking back to that pyramid to pick up my blue box, there was a line of people walking from that pyramid to the cash register, carrying those boxes just like ants from a picnic. So it felt like something interesting was happening here. So long story short, I got the Commodore 64. The only language I knew at the time was BASIC, and barely knew that. I'd had 2 programming classes in college, one in BASIC and one in Fortran. But to be honest with you, I hated computers at that time because, it was mainframes and all that kind of stuff. It was just so enlivening to get that personal computer where you control it. But you know what? One of the things I was interested in doing was writing a 3D flight simulator. This was a little bit before, I guess, Microsoft purchased the SubLogic simulator from Bruce Artwick, and I thought, wow, I'd love to have a great flight simulator. So I started to write one. And I never had classes in, algorithms for graphics and stuff, so I learned about Bresling's line drawing algorithm and all kinds of stuff like that. And I wrote them in BASIC. And I'll never forget, when I first executed my code that drew a line across the screen, it took 30 seconds to draw that line. And I said, something is missing here. This program is very slow. So that led me to learn about this thing called assembly language. So I learned 6502, 6510 assembler, never quite finished the flight simulator, but learned a lot of other stuff. But more than anything else, discovered that I had a real passion for programming. And it's not that I didn't have a passion for engineering, but engineering in the mechanical and aerospace industries it's a very different beast. One of the cool things about programming is that you can create, you can think something up at the dinner table or laying in bed at night, and you can go to your keyboard and you can create what you thought of. There's no other profession in the world that I'm aware of that lets you create things from scratch in that way.
Jeff, would you consider yourself a tinkerer?
I am a tinkerer, but not a general tinkerer. I tinker with certain things, and I tend to get deep into things. I try to stay away from hobbies because I know that if I enjoy it, I'm going to go gung-ho and I'm going to spend way too much time and money on it. So I do have one hobby, which we'll probably talk about just a little bit. But yeah, I'm a tinkerer, but let's say a tinkerer with purpose. There's almost always a goal, an end to what I'm trying to do when I'm tinkering with something.
So that's more of an OCD tinkerer versus an ADD tinkerer. An ADD tinkerer does everything. An OCD tinkerer does it with purpose.
That's a good description. OCD tinkerer. Yeah, I'll take that label.
We've got people in the chat room who are commenting first about the Batman mug in the background. They love that. But secondly, about the model plane, I can't really tell. It either looks like an F4 Phantom or an FA-18. I can't really tell what that is. I don't know if it's a split tail.
It's close. Let me clear out just a moment so you can see it.
Oh, I don't know what that is. That's fuselage.
That one is not a scale model of a full-scale aircraft. You can't see it. You could if I turn the camera 180 degrees, but sitting right in front of me is a 1/6 scale F-16, which you would recognize immediately. So here's the quick story on that. I have always loved things that fly, and in some ways I miss engineering. So a few years ago, my wife said, "You know what? You need a hobby." Because all you do is work. You work all the time. You need to do something so you're not working all the time. So I went out to the local flying field, a radio control airplane club. I'd always had this idea that I wanted to try flying radio control airplanes someday. And over a course of about 10 years, I went from building, little balsa and wood airplanes to 1/6 scale jets with real jet engines in them. So the thing you see behind me there, it's called a BVM Bandit. BVM is the brand, Bandit's the model. It's not a model of a full-scale aircraft, but it's very, very fast. It's designed to be fast. It's designed to be very precise, very aerobatic, and it's amazing when it flies. And just a quick side note there. When I got out of aero school back in the early 1980s, I had this crazy idea that I wanted to build a miniature jet engine someday. At the time, no one thought it could be done. In fact, one of my professors said, it cannot be done. The physics don't support it. Well, it turns out, not only is it possible, but these are commodity items these days. There are about a dozen companies around the world that sell miniature jet engines. You can go online tonight if you want and have one in your doorstep in a couple of days. They burn the same Jet A commercial jet fuel that the big jets burn, and it's a blast to fly, and it's a blast to see them fly.
So Jeff, how does going from writing graphics programs that lines across the screen to writing for PC Magazine about DOS and then to Wintellect? Can you take us through that whole, like, maybe like a miniature walk through history?
Yeah, I sure can. So so when I got that Commodore 64, Lou, like I said, I was just out of school. My wife was still in school. We had just got married. And I had this idea that Commodore needed to pay for itself because $200 was a lot to us back then. So as I learned to code, I started writing games and stuff like that and tried to sell them. Didn't have a lot of luck doing it. But I was reading some of the magazines at the time, like there was one called Compute, I think, that was pretty popular in the Commodore world. And I sent some unsolicited articles to them thinking, hey, maybe I can sell some articles about programming. And they never took me up on that. So in 1986, actually, yes, early 1986, I had gone from my Commodore to an IBM PC. Still had this idea that it'd be nice to make a little money on the side with it. I really had no idea at that time that I'd eventually get out of engineering altogether and turn to these computers full time. But I sent an unsolicited article to PC Magazine. Really didn't expect to hear back, but a couple of days later, I got a call from one of the editors there, and he said, hey, we really like this. We'd like to publish it, and can you write more for us? And I said, sure. So that was the beginning of a long relationship, you know, starting as sort of a guest writer, then becoming a contributing editor. It was a fantastic time to be in the industry. Some of the people that I worked with there, the other writers and the other editors, are still dear friends to this day. Just great people, smart people, and it gave me the exposure that I needed to move on to other things like writing books. So how do we get to Wintellect? It was 1986. I started with PC Magazine. From there, I met some folks at Microsoft. You may remember Microsoft Systems Journal, now called MSD and Magazine. And actually, there was a really good relationship between the editorial staff of PC Magazine and the old Microsoft Systems Journal. So the editor of MSJ said, hey, would you write some articles for us? And I said, sure. And by 1990, I sort of had this idea that not that I would give up engineering someday, but that it was kind of fun writing these articles, and maybe I have a book in me. So made a big decision back in 1990. In the space of just a few weeks, my wife quit her job, I quit my job, and our first child was born. So we went from 2 incomes, no kids, to neither of us had a job. I had a book contract, and we had a newborn, and we were with each other 24/7, all day, every day. So for the next several years, I wrote books, first for Ziff Davis Press and then Microsoft Press. In the mid-90s, I started doing some consulting work and started to do training for companies and stuff. And then Wintellect came about in 2000 because 2 of the gentlemen that I met in my training work, one was Jeffrey Richter, the other was John Robbins. They're really good at what they do. They're fantastic technically. They're great speakers. And the 3 of us became friends. And around late 1999 or so, we said, you know what? We're having a lot of fun doing this. We like each other. Why don't we do this together? So in the spring of 2000, we signed the papers to incorporate Wintellect, and I guess the rest is history.
Jeff, I want to talk about Wintellect when we come back.
Yeah.
I want to describe exactly what it is. The way it was described to me was BASF, this huge multi-global conglomeration. Their slogan is, we don't make the products that you love, we make the products that you love better. And I kind of think Wintellect is the same way. They don't make the software you use, but they make the software you use better. We're going to talk about that just after this break. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the first sponsor of this episode of Coding 101. Now, I got to ask you, hey, developers, when you have a project that you want to get out to the world, how do you do it? It's not as simple as it used to be in the old day where you would stand up a server and then the people in the office would hit it to see if they could make it to fail. No, your standards are a whole lot higher these days. You need to use a professional sandbox. You need to be able to get your images up and down. You need to scale it from very small deployments to large deployments. Well, you could buy yourself some actual iron in a colo sitting somewhere with a fat pipe. Yeah, you could go through that trouble. Or you could just go with DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is a way for you to stand up the projects that you're doing right now in just a few minutes. In fact, just a few seconds. Now, whether you're an experienced code warrior or just getting started, you deserve flexible, reliable, and affordable hosting. DigitalOcean gives you that with Droplets. These are private virtual servers that can be customized and deployed quickly to host your websites, your web apps, your production applications, your personal projects, virtual desktops, pretty much anything else that you can think of, and you get full root access. Now, DigitalOcean is built for developers and used by over 400,000 of them, including Twit TV. It lets us deploy and configure our droplets via a streamlined control panel or a simple API so that we can start in the sandbox, we can see if it's actually going to work, open it up to a select group so that we can see if our API can withstand real-world traffic, and then grow it when we need it. It's part of the strategy. This is how you grow a successful business on the internet. You can choose your OS, Ubuntu, CentOS, Debian, Fedora, CoreOS, and FreeBSD, and one-click install allows you to quickly deploy the most commonly used apps like Django, Docker, Drupal, LAMP, GitLab, MediaWiki, Node.js, WordPress, Ghost, Magneto, OwnCloud, Ruby on Rails, and so much more. All their servers are built on hex-core machines with dedicated ECC RAM and RAID SSD storage. In fact, you can get up to 20 CPUs, 64 gigabytes of memory, and 640 gigabytes of SSD storage with each and every single one of these droplets. As you need it, you just grow it. That means it's going to be scalable. That means they'll do all the backup for you. They'll let you create clones and snapshots with a simple tool. They'll let you control your DNS and even give you control of your own private IPs. Now, they have a web console with HTML5 plus SSH, SFTP, and KVM VNC for virtual desktops that are secure, and they've got an extremely active community. This is actually important. I can't stress enough how big it is to have people who are so dedicated to your platform and to your service that they're willing to help out other people who may be going through the same growing pains as they. If you really want to grow your business, you want to grow it with DigitalOcean. And it's so easy to get started. You could start up an SSD cloud server in as little as 55 seconds. DigitalOcean has incredibly affordable and straightforward pricing. Servers start at just $5 per month. There's also hourly pricing available in case you just want to stand something up quickly and expose it to the internet. It starts at less than a penny per hour. But we're going to make it easy for you to get this service because we're going to give it to you for free. Just go to DigitalOcean.com and create an account. Once you confirm your email and account information, you can go to the billing section and enter the promo code C101 for a free $10 credit. That's plenty to get started. And you can explore what DigitalOcean can do for you and your business. That's DigitalOcean.com. And once you sign up, enter the code C101 in the billing section for a $10 credit. And we thank DigitalOcean for their support of Coding 101. We're speaking with Jeff Prosise from Wintellect, who's going to tell us what Wintellect is. So, Jeff, we've got your backstory. We've seen how you went from a love of engineering in general to seeing if maybe there's a little something to do with this programming thing. And now we've landed at Wintellect. What is Wintellect?
So Wintellect is a developer services company. We do two things. We do developer training, and we do app dev type consulting. So Lou knows me. Lou and I met because I was teaching classes at Microsoft. For the last 10 years or so, I've been traveling to Microsoft campuses around the world and teaching various things to developers there. And John and Jeffrey, my two business partners at Wintellect, do the same thing. But the bigger part of our business is the consulting business. We say it's app dev, and yes, sometimes companies come to us and they want an application built from scratch, from the ground up, and just delivered to them turnkey. We do that. We enjoy doing that. But we also do a lot of other types of consulting. Sometimes it's architectural consulting. Sometimes it's bringing some of our best people in to be part of a team at a customer site for a while, to help architect, to help just help make the dev process go smoother, to act as advisors, to act as senior coders and things like that. So we're all about software development. We're primarily a company that works with the .NET stack and the web stack. It's kind of interesting, even though we started out primarily as a Windows and .NET company, probably 50% of the business that we do today on the consulting side is on the web stack, because it seems that everything is going that way. So it's interesting. We have a lot of really smart people working at the company. It's like a family. We interact a lot, and it's a really fun way to make a living.
Let me ask you about that. So as a consultant, you get to go into these houses, into these design shops, and essentially tell them what the best practices are, which is a nice way of saying these are the things you're doing wrong. What's the most common mistake you see in the development process?
That's a great question. Probably let me rephrase the question just a bit. What's the thing that I most commonly see that impedes the development process? It's usually not the skill of the coders. I mean, you go into any company these days, small companies, large companies, work with their development staff. You meet a lot of smart and interesting people who know how to write code. But you know what? You know where most companies fail? They fail because of the process. They fail because of the human factors, because the wrong people are making decisions, or the people that need to be making the decisions don't have the power to do that. Sometimes it's the architects at the top who are driving a poor design. Oftentimes the developers know better, but they just don't have the power to make the change. And that's not to say that no one's good at building software. I mean, almost all companies that do it succeed in doing it. What we're all about at Wintellect is helping them succeed. We often say, when someone says to us, tell me in 10 words or less what you guys do, we say, we help you build better software faster. It's not just that we have a lot of smart folks who know how to code, who know how to architect. It's that we have folks who know how to set up a process and drive a process. And by the way, it's not something that we impose on our clients. Sometimes a client comes to us and they want that. They want structure. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just say, hey, would you review our architecture? Or can you put a couple of guys on this team to lead that team? So, you know, every job is different. But when it comes to why do development efforts fail, I would say it's usually not because of the developers, it's because of the process or lack thereof.
Let's talk a little bit about process, because I've heard it from both sides. I work with Lou, which is a great privilege because it allows me to see the side from a very competent coder who also has to act as a manager. So he does need to be worried about process. But I've also worked with people who are pure coders. They have no interest whatsoever in ever being in any managerial position. They just want to code. And to them, process stops them from doing what they need to do. It stops them from being the brilliant coder that they think they are. Do you run into that culture at all? I mean, because you come in and you're an outsider coming into a company telling them, well, we need to figure this out, and we need to figure this out, and we need to follow these steps. And I'm sure you must rankle some people.
That does happen at times. You know, software engineering is as much about human engineering as it is about writing code. It is true that sometimes when you come in from the outside, you may be saying some of the things that people on the inside have been saying, but they were ignored. You're not, just because you came in from the outside. But you know what? Yeah, almost any situation you go into when you become part of a team or you're even leading that team, you're going to have some who don't buy into it completely. The last thing you want to do then is, you know, try to act like a dictator. You're not going to get anywhere with that. You're going to make matters worse. It's really about managing people. You know, something that Lou is good at. I'm sure Lou will tell you. if he goes in and just tries to slam his fist on the desk, not that there's never a time to do that, there are some times, but that's sort of a last resort. It's about getting people to buy into the vision, and getting them to want to do what needs to be done, as opposed to feel like they're being forced to do it.
Lou, what about that? Let me throw over to you, because again, you are a manager. You're not just a programmer. You have to lead your team. So you have to be involved in this process that Jeff's speaking about. What's your experience of trying to guide programmers who sometimes they just want to create. They don't want to hear your mission statement?
Yeah, I think that's really tough, because there are some developers that just like to live in a cave and close their door and not have any lights on and black out their windows and just program all day long. And and there's others who like to kind of branch out and do lots of different things and learn from developers. And so you kind of have to change the way you work with those different individuals, give them projects they can potentially do and branch out to that get their passions going and their juices flowing, versus other people. So it's all dependent on, at the specific time dealing with specific people. So you have to do it different ways. But, sometimes you have to work as a team. And so the only way to really do that is to kind of bring the team together and show that you're kind of working on a common goal, a common vision. Even though one person might be doing low-level programming versus high-level or that kind of thing, everyone needs to know that they have a piece in the pie and that they're going to be kind of working towards a common goal. And then once you get to that goal, showing how it impacts the customers. And that's super important, because a lot of coders, like you said, just like to code, and then they like to move on to the next project, and they don't really know how it impacts anybody. And so what Microsoft's doing really good right now is they are showing how their products are impacting customers. And that's super important, not only for the customers to see, but it's good for the developers internally to see, even especially the ones who like to code with their heads down, because they don't know how it's impacting. So I think that's one of the biggest important things to do when it comes to those types of coders.
Jeff, we've got a member of the chat room right now, Dr. Morbius, who is saying, look, I work best when I'm in the zone. And I hear that a lot, actually. And I'm the same way. When I'm working, leave me alone. It takes me so long to get in the zone. Once I'm in there, don't talk to me. Don't suggest anything. Just let me finish my train of thought, get it down into my compiler, get it into my document, whatever I'm doing. So how do you do what Lou just talked about? Lou talked about getting these people to understand that their work impacts the customer or impacts the dev team. How do you teach that? I mean, that's got to be one of your biggest challenges coming into these companies.
So getting people to get on board with you and getting them to come around and build a team is not mutually exclusive with being in the zone. I tell you this, almost every good programmer that I know knows exactly what the zone is. My wife jokes about it. Back in my book writing days, when I was writing code then, but I was spending a lot more time at the desk writing books. I would disappear after dinner, say, hey, I'm just going to get 15 minutes into this chapter, and 6 hours later I'd come upstairs and she'd say, wow, it's 2 a.m. And I said, no, it's just been 30 minutes or so. And it's not just programmers. I think most people who are good at what they do and are passionate about what they do it in the zone because they are so focused and so single-minded. So I tell you what, if I've got a team, I'd like to have a lot of people that do that, because when I have developers that live in the zone, they're probably really, really good at what they do. Now, might they need some channeling? Sure. But that's, again, just the challenge of getting them to buy into your vision, and as opposed to making them feel like it's being imposed on them. You never get anywhere that way. I mean, there are times where you have to take a hard line, but usually that is very much a last resort.
Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about how Wintellect got involved with Microsoft, because Lou wouldn't have known you, we wouldn't have had you on the show if that didn't happen. What drove you to work with Redmond?
Yeah, so I first worked with Redmond back in the early 90s when I started writing for Microsoft Systems Journal. So MSJ was part of Microsoft, so through them I met a lot of other folks at Microsoft. And then in the mid-90s, I wrote my first book for Microsoft Press. It was a book on MFC, which I still to this day meet people who say, I learned C++ from your book, or learned MFC from your book. So through Microsoft Press, I met a lot of people as well. Then in the early 2000s, we got a call from Microsoft one day and basically said, hey, will you come train some developers for us? And we said, of course, because that's, for me, John and Jeff, the three technical guys who founded Wintellect, we love to write code. We really, really love to teach. And all the books, the magazine articles, the blog posts we've written over the years, it's all just different ways of teaching. So early 2000s, we started doing a little bit of training from Microsoft. That led to more and more. So for the last 10 years or so, I think we've been Microsoft's #1 internal training vendor. And it's been awesome because not only have we gotten to visit just about all of the Microsoft development centers around the world, but I got to meet a lot of awesome people. I mean, like you said, I probably wouldn't have met Lou had I not been working as a contractor at Microsoft and doing that training. One of the great things about doing the training is that I met a lot of people on a lot of different dev teams. So it kind of helped me put together a big picture of what Microsoft is doing, where they're going, how they're planning to get there. To be honest with you, probably a better big picture than a lot of Microsoft employees have, because when you're working there in a dev team, you tend to be pretty much focused on what that dev team is trying to produce, and often don't have a lot of chance to come up for air and see what's going on around you.
Right, right. Let me ask you this. We've got Paula Dean in the chat room, who is obviously a dev and is passionately saying, don't blame the dev guys. You know, you can see all these people with headphones on their heads because they're trying to stay in that zone, because they're trying to stay productive, they're trying to stay creative. And, you know, you rob them of their space, they try to get a little bit of privacy, and then they're blamed for being isolationist. And I've seen this side too. I've seen the devs sort of get tossed into the category of almost subhuman. They're just code monkeys. You give them a project, they give you code, otherwise you leave them alone. Is that part of the process when you come into a company like Microsoft, which has so many programmers, that I'm sure that's got to happen?
Yeah, and you know, the funny thing is you need the code monkeys. And by the way, let me just say this up front. I'm a code monkey. I'm like Lou. I don't really get into management. You know what I like to do? I like to write code. I like to sit in my basement, in my office at home where I am right now, work on a project and write code. So, yeah, and I apologize if I came across as blaming the developers. You know, building software today is an art, but it's also a science. It not only takes the right people with the right coding skills, it takes the right managers, it takes the process, but what it takes more than anything else, and this is maybe the hardest part to get or to instill, is it takes a culture of writing great code that has been tested, code that is secure, code that is ready to ship. That's a cultural thing. And culture is hard to instill. You know, you think about when a new CEO comes into a company that's failing. He's been tasked by the board with making big changes. The very first thing that he usually has to do is change the culture of that company, because if that company is failing, they don't have a culture of success, and you can't succeed without that. I'll tell you, one of the awesome things about working with Microsoft over the years is not only meeting all the smart people, but the culture at Microsoft. Now, yeah, it has changed some in recent years. I happen to think it's changed for the better in the last couple of years, because Microsoft was getting beat up a lot, especially around the Windows 8 timeframe. But the culture at Microsoft is incredible. It is a culture of doing, a culture of success. Developers feel empowered. You know, one of the things at Microsoft that people respect is when you're a tester. A lot of young developers come in, they're put in a group that does testing. At a lot of companies, you're even below the code monkeys. At Microsoft, those guys are just as important as every other dev on the team, and oftentimes they progress on to senior devs and architects and everything else. So it's all about culture, and I know that's kind of a vague answer, but you have to set that culture. And yeah, it takes smart developers, but it takes people that are willing to come together and work as a team, that feel like they're all pulling the same wagon, pulling it in the same direction. And like Lou said, for young developers especially, the best way to let them see how important that is to let them see the results of it.
So, Jeff, one thing that I was curious about is you've done so many trainings over the years. In fact, I've taken trainings around, I think it was Silverlight and XAML and HTML5 and Windows programming, .NET programming. There's been many trainings I've taken over the years. I started in Fargo. When I came to Redmond, I took many more. So what kind of moves you towards the next technology? Is it just interest, or do you think it's something that maybe the industry will pick up and that's what you want to train on or what you want to learn? Like, what kind of moves you towards those new technologies?
Yeah, it's usually driven by what my interest is in. I did a lot of client programming back in the 80s and 90s with, Win16 and Win32 and MFC and even COM and stuff like that. I made a big shift in the early 2000s when .NET came out over into ASP.NET. That was sort of a new area for me, but I was really, really intrigued by, how do web applications work? What is HTTP? How does all that kind of stuff work? And I did have this sense that it would be a good place to go because a lot of customers would be interested. But yeah, it is driven primarily by what I'm interested in. I mean, I'm really passionate about Windows Phone apps and about Windows Store apps, or now in Windows 10 Universal apps. I don't know, honestly, if there's going to be a lot of demand for training or consulting around those. I hope there will be. But I certainly enjoy working with those platforms. I think they're great platforms. They have great APIs. I've invested a lot of time in learning them and getting to know people on the teams that built them, and plan to continue going down that path, at least for now. I'll tell you one thing that has been kind of interesting. The number one problem that customers come to us with today is not that they need help building an app. It's usually that they need this app to run on a lot of different platforms, in particular iOS and Android. And hopefully they want it to run on Windows Phone and perhaps Windows as well. So I've invested a lot of time in Xamarin and Xamarin Forms in the past year. And in fact, we're doing a fair amount of consulting work around Xamarin and Xamarin Forms now at Wintellect. And it's pretty cool because with Xamarin Forms, I can use XAML and C#. I mean, it almost feels, Lou, like we're back in the Silverlight days. But then I build it, and I can watch it light up on iOS and on Android and on Windows Phone, which is so, so cool.
When we come back, I do want to ask you about that, about moving into the Windows app direction, because it's a very interesting strategic move, and I think maybe you could give us some insight into it. But before we go there, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank the second sponsor of this episode of Coding 101. Now, if you've watched any of my shows on the Twit TV network, you know that there's one place that I go when I want to find knowledge, when I want to get information, when I need reference, or just if I need to learn a new skill. If you want to go someplace that does it right, you go to lynda.com. Now, lynda.com is a one-stop shop, a repository for knowledge on the internet. Now, I know that you've got your choice of tutorials. You could go to YouTube. You could go to any number of websites, but lynda.com has the right combination of professional content, good audio, good lighting, good camera work, high production values, and experts who are passionate about the subjects that they are teaching. It's what makes lynda.com different than everything else. Lynda.com is for problem solvers, and we know that you're problem solvers. We know that you're curious because you're watching Coding 101. It's for the people who want to make things happen. Maybe you want to develop an app. Maybe you want to learn a new programming language. Maybe you want to master Photoshop or sharpen your photography skills. Hey, maybe you want to pick up on a new hobby. Lynda.com has everything you need to feed that curious mind. Some of the latest lynda.com courses that I can recommend are Up and Running with PHP, Simple XML, Test-Driven Development with Node.js and Google App Engine Essential Training. I know I've talked about Code Clinic before. It's a multi-course series where lynda.com experts look at common code challenges and offer their solutions using C++, C#, Java, PHP, Ruby, and Python. And they just released new installments for each language, including 4 new entries covering JavaScript, C, R, and Swift. Now, lynda.com has helped me when I've been trying to up my game on photography, specifically aerial photography. They've got an entire section of courses that help you to fly your drones better, to set up your shots more professionally. If lynda.com can do that for me, I know it can do something for you. It'll help you watch and learn from top experts who are passionate about their teaching material. It'll let you stream thousands of video courses on demand and learn on your own schedule. It will let you learn at your own pace, which is how you need to learn. You don't need someone telling you that you need to finish this module in this number of hours, this number of days or months or weeks. You get to move from the courses you want, the ones that you put into the queue, even the playlists that you share with your friends. Lynda.com is all about letting you learn the way that you need to learn. One of my favorite parts is the fact that they have transcripts of all their courses. So if you're looking for a specific answer, reference. So let's say you need to be reminded about how to do something in Adobe Premiere. You don't have to go through the entire Premiere module. You can look for the answer in the transcript and go straight to the question that you need answered. Lynda.com is just good like that. Now, you can download these tutorials and take them with you on your iOS or Android devices. And of course, you can take notes and refer to them later. Lynda.com is really the place where you can learn the way you learn. Now, your lynda.com membership gives you unlimited access to training on hundreds of topics, all for one flat rate. Whether you're looking to become an expert or you're passionate about a hobby, or maybe you just want to learn something new, I want you to visit lynda.com/C101 and sign up for your free 10-day trial. That's lynda.com, lynda.com/C101. And we thank lynda.com for their support of Coding 101. We're speaking with Jeff Prosise from Wintellect, who was just telling us about why he's working with Microsoft, about how Wintellect got involved in one of the largest software manufacturers in the world. Now, Jeff, I want to ask you, what drove you to Windows and Windows app development?
It was really a result of the fact that most of the programming work that I've done over the years has been for Microsoft platforms and using Microsoft tools. I mean, I started with DOS, went to Windows and all of that. I've always been passionate about the Windows stack. .NET, I think, was just a boon for software developers because, especially for developers not ones building shrink-wrap software, but those who are working in a company building software that drives the enterprise internally, which is the bulk of the software that's written today. .NET just made it so much easier to write code that worked, that didn't leak memory the first time out. So I've always been loyal to the Microsoft stack. So I think it was pretty natural when the Windows Store app model was introduced and when Windows Phone was introduced with version 7. It was just a natural fit for me. And I'm still passionate about those platforms. I mean, I know Windows 8 got a bad rap in a lot of ways. Windows Phone still gets a bad rap sometimes because, yeah, its market share isn't what that of iOS and Android are. But they're great platforms. And as a developer, someone who appreciates not only a well-thought-out API, but a robust API, I love those APIs. I mean, I do a little bit of Android and iOS development too. And yeah, those are good APIs. But you know what? I prefer the Windows and Windows Phone APIs when I have a choice.
Jeff, do you think that with the Xamarin type platform and even with some of the Microsoft Visual Studios type stuff that they're moving into cross-platform, do you think that will help people move more towards the Windows platform building for Windows because they know that they can then kind of build once and deploy everywhere, so to speak, and be able to then have it in multiple app stores? Or do you think that it's just something that's good for Windows developers and they'll be able to get it in multiple places?
Yeah, it's a great question, Lou. I hope that it's going to help Windows, that, hey, if you're building with Xamarin or something like it, and you have it running on iOS and Android, and it's a matter of flipping a couple of switches, and hey, it can run on Windows and Windows Phone too, that would be great. Usually it's not that simple because even with Xamarin Forms, which lets you build not only the business logic, but the UI in a cross-platform way using XAML, you still end up writing some platform-specific code. In Xamarin Forms, it's maybe 10% of the code you write is platform-specific, but the problem there is that, yeah, once you do that, you have it running on iOS and Android, there's still additional time and effort required to get it to run on Windows as well. Will that entice developers to go that little extra distance to do it? I don't know, Lou. I don't know. I hope so. But I tell you what I think it will do. I mean, right now, if you're a Microsoft developer, if you love XAML and C#, outside of Xamarin, well, you're only building for that platform. What Xamarin does for Microsoft developers or developers who work on the Microsoft stack is it lets them use those same skills that they already have, their knowledge of C#, their knowledge of XAML, their knowledge of .NET APIs, and get it running on those other platforms. I said I do a little bit of iOS and Android development. Java is a good language. I remember when the JDK 1.0 was released, I downloaded it, I bought a book, and I learned Java. And I really liked the language. To some extent, I still do today, although I prefer C#. But to be honest with you, I don't like writing code in Objective-C. To me, it is just horrible. Now, I know there are a lot of iOS programmers out there, probably some listening, who will disagree with that. And, you know, a lot of it is what you know. If you grew up on Objective-C, you probably think it's the best language out there. But for me, the fact that I could use Xamarin Forms, use what I already know about XAML and C#, and I can get that running on iOS and Android in addition to Windows and Windows Phone, wow, that's just amazing.
So so for people who are just getting started, what do you think is a good place, whether it's, you know, working with Windows or any of these platforms, where do you think is what's a little nugget of knowledge for them? Where can they start? What's the best way for them to start programming? Is it building universal apps or on devices, or is it just building very simple apps and targeting a specific platform?
You know, either can work. And I'm going to say up front, I'm probably a little bit biased, but I think it is very viable to learn to write universal apps for Windows 10, which are pretty cool, great API. And Xamarin, there's actually a preview release of Xamarin Forms out now that supports WinRT, and I'm certain we'll be supporting the Windows 10 Universal App Model very soon as well. I think that's a great way for people to get their feet wet. And the cool thing, Lou, is if you're going to build universal apps for Windows devices, for Windows 10 devices, you're going to do that in all likelihood using XAML and C#. So if you don't already know XAML and C#, you learn about them writing for the Universal Windows platform, and then you look up and you can take 90% of what you already know, and you can have it working on iOS and Android too. So yeah, that's a great way to go about it.
Jeff, I got to ask, because there's going to be people in the chat room who are going to be saying, wait a minute, it's great that you like to develop XAML applications, that you personally seem to have a bent towards Windows applications, but especially the younger generation of programmers are looking at the data, and all the data says, no, if you want to make money, you write iOS apps. And we both know that's the wrong reason to get into programming, but that's very alluring. What kind of advice would you give to someone, and this question comes to us from the chat room from JJ to the 4884, to someone who's getting into the field and sees the allure of the promised gold pot at the end of the iOS rainbow? When you tell them, look, you got to expand, you got to look at other frameworks, you got to look at other languages, you got to look at other operating systems.
Yeah. So let me tell you a little secret here. Sometimes you do have to follow the money, because if you're going to do this for a living, you have to be able to put food on the table, right? Back when I bought into DOS and Windows in a big way, I really wanted to be programming a Macintosh because I thought they looked so cool, and I wanted to learn about these GUIs. This was pre-Windows. It was in the DOS days. But you know what? You couldn't earn money as a Macintosh developer back in those days. One of the great things about working on the Microsoft stack for all these years that I have is, hey, for a long time, you can make a pretty darn good living as a Windows developer, and you still can to an extent. But you know what? Today, someone who loves the Windows Store app model from Windows 8 or the Universal model from Windows 10 finds themselves in the same position that a Mac programmer did 25 years ago. Can you make a living at it? Here's the problem. There are a lot of people who make a good living writing iOS apps and Android apps. There aren't that many people making a living writing apps for Windows Phone. So that's very realistic, and I think it's something that you have to consider. But in terms of giving advice, I tell you what I would do. I would say go where your passion is, because at the end of the day, you're going to have the greatest chance of success if you're doing something you're passionate about. If you're writing for a platform that you're passionate about, if you love iOS, by all means, you should go there. Now, if you're undecided, if you're coming in right now and you're saying, I'm really starting from the ground up, should I go with iOS, Android, or Windows Phone? I would say it depends on what your goals are. Is this something you want to make a living at? Do you want to be doing this for 20 or 30 years? Well, you might want to go with iOS or Android, but I'll tell you what, I do believe with the Windows 10 Universal Windows platform, with the new app model, the fact that you can write an app that runs on a lot of great devices, from desktops to tablets to phones to Xboxes, and soon HoloLens, which I think is just super, super cool. Don't count Windows out. You can still make a living there. Yeah, there are a lot more people doing it on iOS and Android, but if you're passionate about Universal Windows platform, you should go that way. And you know what? If you're good at it and if you're passionate about it, you're going to find a way to make a living at it.
You know, Lou, we've been telling our audience for a very long time that you got to have the passion. If you don't have the passion, if you don't have that desire to do problem solving, that desire to actually break things down and then program solutions for them, that it's not a good fit. But I think Jeff makes a very good point here, which is you could be the best programmer ever, but you're still going to starve if you're not programming in a language that's going to get you paid. And we've got Paula Dean in the chat room who's saying, look, a Java programmer can get paid twice as much as a .NET programmer. And you can look at the stats and you can say, look, Android may own 80% of all the handsets that were sold in 2014, but 93% of the profit still went to Apple and iOS developers. So how do we give that to our audience? Again, you know, go to JJ to the 4884, someone who's just starting, and we're telling them, follow your passion, and they're saying, okay, but my passion's got 7% of the revenue. How do we reconcile that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a good question. So I think it's one of those things where, you know, learning programming is kind of I like to think of it more of like a universal thing. Once you learn one language, and I think that we talked with Peggy a while ago, she said the same thing, is once you learn a language and you learn a platform, moving to these other languages and these other platforms are usually fairly easier to do than just starting from scratch. And so if you find a passion that you like doing and you become really good at it, like Jeff, who's done so many different languages and platforms over the years, it becomes slightly easier to move to these platforms and start learning them. And then you'll start to understand, wow, it was better developing on this other one, but yet, you know, the money's kind of on this side. In fact, you know, in college, I didn't do any Java programming. It was all C++ and C because I was an EE. And then moved to computer science. And then I started doing C# only when I started working at Microsoft. So I didn't actually do C# until I started here. It was when 2.0 version of .NET came out. And so I think, you know, one of those things is I was passionate about coding and you know designing processors and VLSI and all of this stuff. And then when I came into the industry and started seeing things, you know, how big companies and corporations were writing .NET and, you know, all these other applications, ASP.NET, I started thinking, well, maybe it's time for me to start learning something else. And when I started learning these languages and these platforms, it was a lot easier, you know, and then I never kind of looked back. So I think, and then same thing goes with Java now that, you know, a couple of years ago when Android became huge, you know, I started learning Java and getting into the Dalvik engine and understanding how that works, very similar to the .NET runtime. And so it's one of those things is you just get really interested and that passion kind of flows over to the other platforms. So I don't think it should be scary to go to where your passion is, even if it's not where the money is, because there's going to be an option for you and for you to kind of find something somewhere that will pay you what you need to get paid.
Fantastic. Jeff, I want to give you the opportunity to offer any last nuggets of wisdom for people who want to get into programming, or for programmers who may be feeling a bit frustrated, maybe looking at changing their process. What can you tell them to make it all better?
I'm not sure I can tell them much to make it better, but I can maybe tell them something that will prepare them for what they're going to find out. First off, programming is the most awesome occupation in the world. You get to play God. You get to build things from scratch. You can think things up, you can dream them up, and you can implement them. Your kids can say, hey, Dad, wouldn't it be great if there was an app that did this? And you can write it for them. It's just awesome. Makes you Gives you a lot of respect in your kids' eyes, by the way. But here's something you should know when you go into software development. You know, if Lou and I had stayed in engineering, especially me, since I was in mechanical and aerospace, you know, they're not advancing the cutting edge very quickly there. I probably could have gone to college and worked a nice 30 or 40-year career and retired. When you're in code, you have to be prepared to throw away most of what you know and relearn it every few years. There's just no way getting around that. You know, I don't know what the most popular operating system for mobile devices is going to be 10 years from now or 15 years. It may be iOS, but don't be surprised if it's not. 10 years ago, if you had said to me, hey, it's becoming a JavaScript world, and Jeff, you're going to be writing a lot of JavaScript code, which I do these days, I would have said, you're crazy. JavaScript's a toy language. It's the #1 programming language today. If someone asked me, you know, what if I'm going to learn one language to start out with, what should it be? It's not that JavaScript is my favorite language. It's not. C# is. But you know what? If you learn to program in JavaScript, like Lou said, you can then learn to program in other languages, and JavaScript is probably going to serve you well for a long time. So, again, just be prepared for change. You'll have to keep your skills updated. The only job security that a programmer has is his or her skill set. I tell people that all the time, especially when I meet people that are working in corporations. They've been doing the same thing for 10 years. I can see them getting out of date, but they don't realize they're getting out of date. At the end of the day, your job security is how hungry you are, how willing you are to watch shows like this one, to read books, to learn new languages, to learn new libraries, to learn new platforms. If you're willing to do that, then there's going to be a place for you in this industry for a long time. And if I may throw one last thing out there as well, when we hire developers at Wintellect, we have a pretty stringent hiring process. I think about between 1 and 2 and 100 people that apply here actually get a job offer from us. What may surprise people is what we're looking for. We're not necessarily looking for the developer who is the smartest or who knows the most languages. What we're looking for is smart people who are going to stay current, who are hungry, developers who are going to be reading books at night and teaching themselves things. Because you know what? Even at a big company like Microsoft, if you don't want to keep yourself up to date, your employer is not going to be able to keep you up to date either. If you are a programmer and you do keep yourself up to date, you're adding value for your employer and you're making sure that there's going to be a way for you to feed your family for a long time. So be prepared for change. Don't get down about it. It's going to happen. You have to adapt. Be prepared to embrace it and take advantage of it rather than let it get you down.
That's Jeff Prosise, the co-founder of Wintellect, telling you to embrace the change and get ready for the future. Jeff, I want to thank you so very much for joining us for this episode of Coding 101. It's been a blast. It's been a lot of fun. We don't often get to hear from the process people, and as we know, the process people are as much a part of the creation process as the code monkeys and the code warriors. Could you please let our audience know where they can find you, where they can find your work, where they can find your company, maybe where they can reach out to see if they can join the next seminar that you teach?
Absolutely. At your convenience, just go to www.wintellect.com. It's intellect with a W on the front if you don't know how it's spelled. So www.wintellect.com. One thing you'll find there is a link to what we call our Dev Center. We publish lots and lots of articles there from our blogs and from other places. We cover the web stack. We cover the Microsoft stack. We're doing a lot of Xamarin stuff lately, lots of opportunities to learn there. And if you want to apply for a job with us, or you want to talk to us about having us perhaps help with a project you're working on, you can contact us there. And one thing, too, if I may, while you're there, check out something we have called Wintellect Now. It's a separate URL, wintellectnow.com. We've taken the training courses that we've delivered at Microsoft for so many years, and a lot of other training courses as well. And we've recorded those. We've put those online so that you can learn from them at your convenience. We're a lot smaller. Our library is a lot smaller than those of some of the other training services out there. But what we focus on is hardcore content, the deep stuff and the new stuff. And you're going to be seeing lots and lots of interesting new content coming out now very soon. So Wintellect.com and WintellectNow.com.
Fantastic. Once again, Jeff, it's a pleasure. We're going to have you back on to give us drinking stories about Lou MM.
I would love to do that. And let me tell you this, when you get Lou around a 5-gallon jug of jet fuel, watch out.
And actually, if you ever come to the West Coast, come to San Francisco, you can bring a couple of your models. I'll bring out my quadcopters. And actually, I'm working on a new VTOL craft, which that uses electric ducted fans. So you might enjoy flying that.
Ooh, like an F-35 model or a Harrier.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly.
I'm not sure about flying it, but I would love to see it fly. I'll watch you while you do it.
You can fly it because I'm used to having things crash. That's kind of my thing. That's what I do. But Jeff, thanks again. Folks, I'm sorry, but we have used up all of our time. Thank you for being with us for this episode of Coding 101. Of course, I want to thank my fabulous co-host, my fabulous robo-coder. Wait, what are we calling you again, Lou? I forgot your title for this episode.
No, robo-coder is great.
Okay, our robo-coder, Lou Maresca. Lou, you got to tell the folks where they can find you.
Absolutely. You can always find me at Twitter at LouMM. And of course, all my work at Microsoft you can find at crm.dynamics.com.
There you go. And folks, don't forget that you can always find our show at our show page, twit.tv/coding101, C101, code. Just go there. It all drops into the same place. You'll find all of our back episodes. So if you want to download an entire module, say the first or second or third C# module, the one on PHP, the one on Perl, the one on Ruby on Rails, you can get it all there so that you can learn at your leisure. But you'll also find this little drop-down menu that our TD Zach is showing you so you can have every episode automatically delivered into the device of choice. Audio, video, high-definition video, iOS, Android, Mac, PC, desktop, laptop. We've got a format for you because we want you to be able to enjoy the show the way you want to enjoy it. Also, don't forget that we do this show mostly live on Mondays, 2:30 p.m. Pacific time at live.twit.tv. And we've got some form of chat room at irc.twit.tv where you can join into the conversation. In fact, I'll see you right on the screen over here so I can make sure your questions get asked to our experts. As always, I want to thank the people who make this show possible, to Lisa and to Leo, and of course, my super TD Eskimo, Zach, who he looks a lot like a Twitter page. It's very, very strange. But Zach, could you please tell the folks where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. And actually, I need your guys' help. I need to replace this blue banner here. So if you want to throw me some suggestions, that would be appreciated. There
you go, folks. Zach will do whatever you tell him to do. Just remember he told you that. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Ballecer. This has been Coding 101. End of line.